Insulin resistance, primary causes, inflammatory proteins, stress, high insulin. Dr. Ben Bikman with Judy Cho. Judy Cho interviews Dr. Bikman. He defines insulin resistance. It is the cause of all of these diseases.
Insulin resistance is really a coin with two sides. Now, the coin that I would be holding, this allegorical coin, would be called insulin resistance. And this is the insulin resistance that we see in the human body, whether it is those more clinically relevant cases of pathological insulin resistance, or whether it's the physiological insulin resistance that happens during puberty and during pregnancy. Right. But regardless, anytime we're calling something insulin resistance in the body, it's this coin with two sides. On one side is the fact that insulin isn't working the same way that it used to. So the hormone insulin isn't able to do all the things it used to at some of the cells of the body. Emphasis on some of the cells. Right. Most of the body's cells respond to insulin as well as they ever did. So it's not like it's a global or universal phenomenon within the body. But the other side of that coin is hyperinsulinemia, or chronically elevated blood insulin levels. These two things will always come together: compromised insulin signaling and chronically elevated insulin itself. Whether it is a pathological insulin resistance that's making the person sick, or whether it is the physiological insulin resistance, which is helping that boy or girl grow very rapidly during puberty, or whether it's helping mommy's body and baby-to-be's body grow in order, throughout the pregnancy. In all of these instances, it's the combination of those two variables, or both sides of the coin. You can't have one without the other. One way of looking at it is looking at insulin resistance as being a result of primary causes or a result of secondary causes. With regards to primary causes, these are stimuli that can cause insulin resistance independent of anything else, and it can cause it all around the body at various cells, at fat cells, muscle cells, liver cells, etc., brain cells. And so there are three primary causes of insulin resistance, as I define it. And by that I mean you can take humans and isolated cells, and if you expose them to all three of these things that I'll mention in a moment, then they'll become insulin resistant. And that is elevated levels of inflammatory proteins, so inflammation, elevated levels of stress hormones, and that's cortisol and epinephrine, and then lastly, chronically elevated levels of insulin. So inflammation, stress, and insulin. Now, inflammation and stress are so widely thrown around these days. In pop culture, everyone wants to blame everything on stress or blame everything on inflammation. And so I'm being very careful using those words. But when we can detect elevated levels of inflammatory proteins or hormones, then the body will become insulin resistant as a direct result. Same with those stress hormones, cortisol and epinephrine. Everything else can be fine, but if those hormones are up for too long, then the body starts to become insulin resistant. And then what I believe is the most relevant, because you can change it so quickly, is the chronically elevated insulin, where too much insulin is causing the body to become resistant to it. So those are the primary causes. And then the secondary cause, I believe, is something like linoleic acid is a prime example of that, because you can't treat cells with, like muscle cells, with linoleic acid and then they become insulin resistant. It doesn't happen. The same with neurons in the brain. It doesn't happen. What can happen is that linoleic acid can do all kinds of bad things in the body from these refined seed oils. But just for to see it through the lens of insulin resistance, I believe it's secondary, because when the fat cells start to accumulate linoleic acid, it forces the fat cells to grow through a process called hypertrophy. Right. And when the fat cells are each individually getting too big rather than multiplying in number, then those bigger or hypertrophic fat cells become insulin resistant. And so in other words, the seed oils can promote insulin resistance through the body, but it would be in part due to what it's doing at the fat cells by making the fat cells grow in a harmful way. And then the fat cells are promoting the insulin resistance throughout the body.
Annotated and summarized. Easy to share with loved ones. The description below the title for this video has these summary points. Danger ethanol. Fructose and high fructose corn syrup are ethanol. Vegetable oils, or seed oils, are ethanol. Dr. Paul Mabry says eating excess sugar and ethanol It's processed through the same pathway. 80% of the calories become fat in the liver and pancreas.